Askreddit asks, teachers of Reddit, what was the most annoying thing you ever had to deal with in class?
Kids using ruler, or any other object, to reflect light onto the board or you face. It's just irritating, but they act like chimps who have discovered fire and giggle like there will never be anything funnier. I love my job, though. Edit. Enjoyed the reading your responses and, for those who asked, I within a high school in the UK. So thanks 11 to 16.
One kid in my class figured out how to turn the projector on/off using an app on his phone. That poor teacher never knew which one of us it was.
I totally did that back in school and laughed like a chimp about it. Needless to say, I was real piece of shit as a kid.
My students once welcomed a stray dog in the room, where he promptly vomited. The week prior, they had a dirty street pigeon in there, claiming it was a pet. It shit all over. I grew weary.
Next time on the plus side, you must be considered the fun teacher if you're the one they trust with their pets and other antics. Closing parenthesis.
I really want to believe that you are a high school teacher.
I had a student years ago named Marco. Marco has Tourette's and his tics were usually calling out Mom, Lily, his sister, and most often his own name. Try teaching algebra when you hear Marco. And, without fail, a few kids yell Polo. All year long. Note, only really annoying for me, Marco thought the exchange was hilarious and was quite the popular kid.
I'm just glad your students seemed accepting. I'm sure Marco was glad that his Tourette's had people laughing with him and not at him.
Really happy they accepted him. Sorry you had to deal with it though, lol.
Inability to fill in the attendance register. 30 in class. Only 27 names on register. Who hasn't filled in their name? We all have. No, you haven't. Who hasn't filled it in? Single quote. Silence. Start asking individually until register is finally filled in. Amazing how people will argue that they have filled in their name when they haven't. Or when a student is absent and you're just checking with the class but one of them is adamant that they've seen him today. Face with rolling eyes.
The principal. Easily the most annoying thing. The first school I worked at, the principal would go to every classroom every day. Sometimes multiple times per day. He and the vice principal tried to micromanage every aspect of teachers' classrooms. All it did was disrupt the flow of the class and piss off both my students and me on a daily basis. University level. So I am not sure if this counts. But he would come to class and watch television shows on his laptop. I don't have an attendance requirement. I asked him to please just watch them outside instead of coming to class. He said he was very sorry and would not do it again. After that, he was still pretty clearly watching shows in class on his laptop, with the sound down, but would click away any time I came near. I don't understand. At least watch it silently with subtitles on.
My mom taught middle school kids with high-functioning autism for a decade. For her it was a toss-up between the boy who wouldn't stop masturbating in class and the girl who refused to wear pads during her period and just bled all over chairs. Edit. To answer the same questions. The boy wasn't just whipping his junk out in class. He did it through his pants or through the pockets. They managed to curb the behavior by banning him from wearing sweatpants and giving him safe objects to fidget with because I think it was a fidget habit for him. A fidget cube would have gone a long way to helping, I'm sure. But this was 13+ years ago. Chronic masturbating is definitely really common in autistic kids. It's just that most of them aren't this dedicated. The girl hated wearing pads because of sensory defensiveness, which is common in autistic kids. I sort of understood where she was coming from. A little bit. Pads feel like diapers when you're not used to them. Even when you're neurotypical. If you have sensory issues, I'm sure it's so much worse. At first her mom kept her home on her period. Then eventually just sent her to school with a cushion and a towel to sit on to avoid ruining school property. Eventually she was pulled out of school and sent elsewhere. She was pretty bright and academically did well. But she was some distance beyond socially inept and clearly needed help. These two were unusual. Most kids weren't quite this bad. Just a bit odd.
Parents who ask why I've not taught their 2-year-old to read. Dude, if they were ready and we had the staff to sit one-on-one to teach them, I'd love to. But I'm too busy changing them, cleaning and doing pointless paperwork. There is a lot more to learning to read than sitting a kid down and trying to shove books down their throats. Also, revenge poopers. Little Johnny got mad because I didn't let him put the Lego up his nose or keep hitting Sally. He goes and poops on the floor and waits for me to find it.
You could not pay me enough.
I'm a computer science teacher. This is important as my students usually have access to a computer. One student likes to be hated by the other students. So he found an online tone generator and set it to a frequency that older people wouldn't be able to hear. But it would massively annoy his classmates. Thankfully, I'm not particularly old and have fairly tuned in hearing from a background in audio engineering, so I could just mute his computer. The most annoying part is that if he put as much effort into his work as he did into creative ways to piss people off, he could do really well.
He wants attention, and negative attention is easier to get than positive attention.
I've had students do this on their phone. So frustrating when you can't hear but other students are complaining. Who do I believe?
The country I teach in sells energy drinks to the small children on their break. Then they come into class bouncing off the walls and won't stop talking.
What country is this?
That would be really annoying. Luckily in the UK some point last year, most supermarkets had a 16+ rule on energy drinks.
Former primary and secondary school teacher here based in the UK. My vote goes towards incompetent or robotic senior management. Also, their policies, making you do reports during holidays. Except it's worse because they open the system a week or so before said holiday. Meaning technically they're not making you do them in the holidays. Not employing cover supervisors, so you end up using your free period to cover the lessons of your absent colleagues, thereby building resentment towards them. Not being allowed to sit down at all during lessons. Spontaneously sticking their head in the classroom to see if you need any support, see if you're sitting down. Abuse of the term support. I'm sure many more will be added to this list. Edit. As this is taking off, I thought I'd add a couple more thanks to inspiring replies. Business people running schools. Overuse of business language such as rigor, performance, review, oversight, synergy, added value, and all the other wank words many of us left businesses to get away from. Surveillance cameras in the classroom for everyone's protection. Edit. Gold. Amazing. Thank you. Das so many have asked. The sitting thing. It means you're not engaging with the students during the entire lesson. Personally, I've never had a problem with it. It suits my teaching style. I constantly did this as a teaching assistant, and I'm an active person who enjoys exercise. Especially when it's built into my day. But to make it policy rather than guidance is bullshit micromanagement.
Bottle flipping and dabbing. To this day, the sound of a half-filled bottle of water landing on the floor fills me with rage.
One of my 7th graders dabbed while he was writing. Since his head was already bent over his desk, he slammed his head right into it. Turned from annoying to so satisfying.
I see a bottle flip and it goes straight in the bin or on my desk until the end of the lesson. My students used to dab as they entered the classroom, and one time I dabbed back. They never did it again, haha.
I teach English in a Chinese kindergarten, nursery. Annoying may be a tad strong. But it is unfortunately inconvenient and counterproductive when the local teacher is overeager. Some are taking an active part in the class, which is great. But oftentimes they step in to correct the kids and do so incorrectly, pronunciation particularly. Also due to the different teaching approach, and I guess impatience, they tend to push the kid and stress them out to give an answer without giving enough time to think and come up with something. To elaborate on the second point, I'd rather the kid gave me any answer by themselves, however incorrect, so that we can correct it together, than the teacher pushing or giving the answer and destroying the kid's confidence in the process.
just how much of a danger small children are to themselves and others. We've got to catalog every playground injury, which, while understandable in theory, is actually incredibly time-consuming. And the kids have been taught to find a grown-up for everything, so one minute you'll be applying ice to someone who ran into a post, and then filing in the same forms for the kid who wanted a band-aid because they have a hangnail.
Once during a year 10 maths class one was teaching, there was a really bad smell. It smelt like poop. At first I thought maybe someone had just farted, but it was much stronger than that. The students started to move away from the smell, and it turned out they were all moving away from one student. It turned out that one of the students in the class struggled from incontinence and had actually pooped his pants during my maths class. I never thought that I would have to deal with that, considering I only teach senior high school students.
Poor kid, especially in high school. I dealt with bladder incontinence for a few weeks to sciatica and a severely herniated disc. I had my 4th surgery since Xmas to fix all of this, and they fucked up so bad they almost killed me. I've been in the ICU since Tuesday. Horrific. How did you and the kid handle this?
The paycheck.
Oof. Some of my teachers openly talk about issues like that with the class, and I feel bad most of the time for them.
In Australia, casual relief teachers can make up to $300 per day. It's nuts.
There's a requirement in NY of how much seat time you have to pass certain classes. Like you need X number of labs to take the science regents or whatever. Some dumbass parents and students use all the sick days. Let's say they get 14 before truant, failing, when they don't feel like coming to school. By February they're usually cutting it close and come every day. The annoying part, they come sick all the damn time. Exclamation mark. I've had kids go to the ER with the flu at night. Show up to school with a mask and 103 fever the next morning. Or they have some vomiting bug and jump up, take the trash can and bolt in the middle of my class. Or they can't see, with pink eye in both eyes, or they blow their nose, sniffle every 30 seconds. The worst part is the disruption then infecting everyone else. If you try to send them out they freak out and parents call saying the school is out to get the kid and threatens to pull them out so they count as a dropout. Schools get flagged by the state for dropout rates. Other than that, it's just when kids decide to act all tough and try to tell you off. About once every 4 to 5 years I get one who decides they're going to try to be cool and put me in my place. Edit. If you have an actual doctor's note you get free private tutoring at a certain point from teachers at your house. So chronic conditions are totally fine and not an absence problem. Edit 2. I'd also like to point out schools and teachers are graded on how effective they are based on state tests. That's likely a reason why missing too many days is automatically a fail issue.
Early elementary art teacher here. I was in the middle of teaching a kindergarten class and noticed one of the kids was passing gas, a lot. Luckily it was warm enough outside so I cracked a couple windows without missing a step in my lesson or bringing more attention to the smell. A few minutes later, I realized that the smell is growing at an exponential rate and I had that terrible thought. Someone shit their pants and now they're either too embarrassed to come tell me in front of their peers or scared they will get in trouble, remember. They're 5-year-olds. So, I decide my plan of attack will be to continue teaching my lesson as planned but actively walk around my classroom with an extra heightened sense of smell so I can literally sniff out the kid that did this while still acting normal around all the students. Sure enough, I get to one of the tables and this one kid just smells terrible and it's obvious she did this. I get the kids started on their art projects and ask this girl into the hall to have a chat. I ask her if she pooped her pants and she says no. I ask her if she's sure she didn't and she says yeah she's sure. We go back inside the class and the smell gets even worse. A couple minutes later I ask the same girl back out in the hall and I tell her I know she pooped her pants and that she needs to go to the school nurse to get a change of clothes. After it takes some convincing, I get her out of there and get things cleaned up on the sly so that way a lot of the other kids wouldn't find out what happened and therefore wouldn't tease the girl later. That was a rough day.
I'm a student, but one of my teachers was telling me today about how his class was critiquing an anonymous essay from a student who took the class in the previous year, and one kid raises his hand and says, "I'd rather circumcise myself with a rusty tin can than read that again," and the guy the first was talking to, the teacher, said he had no idea how to respond. I would imagine that
Tin doesn't rust. You probably meant a steel can.
Should have explained to him that he's supposed to recycle those before they rust. Squeaky chairs.
Most of my elementary school classrooms had tennis balls on the feet of the chairs to avoid that issue.
What I mean are chairs that squeak when the plastic of the seat rubs against the metal of the frame. So literally every movement was squeaky.
Duct tape. 50 pounds of it will solve all problems. I was doing relief supply teaching at an all-boys school in North London. The school had a reputation for being difficult, but never did I expect that I would have to try break a group of 16-year-old boys commencing a game of tug-o-war across the science lab.
Don't suppose it was William Ellis by any chance? AKA the second worst secondary in existence.
Marylebone boys. I did a 6-week stint at one point, and there was at least one supply teacher a week who left before first period was over.
That's when we really just dig in. One of my professors from undergrad was notorious for standing in silence until someone answered his question. Or if it was a tutorial, until they asked him one. He'd stand there for the full 50 minutes if he had to. Nothing like an awkwardly prolonged silence to jog people's memory.
Lollipop sticks with their names on. Someone better talk or the sticks come out. And everyone looks to the smart kid to talk. The sticks still come out.
I'm not a teacher, but if you're not familiar with Kahoot, it is a game where all the students go on their phone or a laptop and enter a game code and look at the projector to answer the questions on their phone. However, there is a feature that allows you to choose a custom name, and it has no filter, unless the teacher manually removes them. Examples of names we use include the teacher's full name, "I want to Kahoot myself," and pretty much any swear word that comes to mind. And then when some kids start getting bored after a couple of games, a handful of students will open a website called Kahoot Killer, and they can make up to 10,000 accounts log onto this Kahoot server. And you often get a sudden surge of accounts called Somalian pirates, or Mike Hunt, flooding into this game and beating everyone. Face with tears of joy as if I got a gold medal on my first ever comment. Thank you guys. Grinning face with sweat, face with tears of joy.
Being confronted with the fact that I cannot help all of my students out of the gutter. I teach in special ed. Students who got kicked off of every single school, even SPED schools, in the region go to the school I work at. They have the most extreme behavioral, psychological issues. I was always the strict but nice and respected teacher at my past jobs. But at this job, students just won't accept you no matter how hard you try and how nice you continue to be. Students insult me 1,000 times. Hit me and storm out of the classroom. Fight me during your break. Do all of those things as much as you please. It's okay. I will never give up on you. I will fight the endless fight. And one day, I will be able to help one of you to a better life.
I'm an English teacher in a UK high school. I've been teaching full-time for about 6 months now. And for me at least, the annoying things in the classroom are never just the one-off events. Like a kid doing something awful or whatever. For me, the most annoying thing is the apathy of the average parent, and this becomes the apathy of the average student. Though some genuinely don't care. Most parents want their children to succeed, but either do not help their child to do so, or even actively work against them in some foolish way. The problem then is basically this: without constant support and encouragement at home, a child is unlikely to succeed to a high degree. I'm fully aware that parents have jobs and commitments of their own. But school simply cannot be the entire delivery system for education. Even a tiny bit of extra work at home would reap huge benefits in the long term. The other big frustration for me is that, quite frequently, the best you get out of some students is their minimum effort.
I had an aunt that was a teacher in the 60s. She told me a story about another older teacher that had hearing aids. This was when this is cutting-edge technology. But kids being kids figured out if they took 2 pennies and rubbed them together, it creates interference with hearing aids. People were a lot more self-conscious about this back then. Self-conscious teacher would leave the room, turn the hearing aid down and return to the room. Then the kids would all just mouth their answers Milli Vanilli style. Teachers leave the room, turn the hearing aid back up and again.
I think this might be some kind of urban legend because I've heard this story from a lot of different sources. Always with a slightly different twist.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to support the channel, and above all, have an excellent day you wonderful people.